Hello, my name is Rachel Krug, and I'm the CEO of Virtual Field. Virtual Field is an exceptional eye exam experience with visual fields, color vision, and pupillometry exams in a comfortable patient-friendly headset. And I'm joined today by Dr. Ravi Patel of Eye Associates of Central Texas. Dr. Patel, would you mind briefly introducing yourself?
Yeah, sure. So Ravi Patel. So I'm a practicing ophthalmologist in Central Texas, and basically it's the Austin submarket. We're a practice of six providers and three, soon to be four locations. So I'm one of the practicing physicians. I'm also the managing partner.
Amazing. Let's dive into a couple of questions. So, to start, could you share what it's like balancing being a partner at a private practice and being an eye doctor? How do you manage the business demands while ensuring you provide top-notch patient care?
Yeah, sure. In terms of being a top-notch doctor or physician for that matter, that role doesn't really change. That's the same as if you're an employee or if you're on I guess, the ownership side. And ultimately, that's the part you can't really sacrifice when you're making business decisions for the practice. And so that part just comes first. And so the challenge then becomes sort of balancing the additional administrative duties you might have running a practice on top of seeing patient care. And there's many ways to skin that cat. Personally, I'd say we're not the biggest practice, but we're also not a small practice anymore. And so for us, having these processes has been really important with a strong sort of management team, people that are employees that I empower to take ownership of certain parts of the practice. And we just carve out times to have meetings where we can kind of review some of the data points. Like at this point, they know reports I'm going to want to see from the income statement or accounts receivable or patient encounter visits. And we just kind of meet weekly to see if there's any friction points within the practice and just make sure we're sort of achieving what we want to achieve on the business side, while making sure we don't interrupt anything on the patient care side.
That's awesome. As the owner of the practice, what are some of the biggest challenges you face, both on the patient care side and the business operation?
Yeah. I'd say the biggest challenge is probably something that most people are experiencing, which is there's this constant challenge of, decreasing reimbursements from all insurance plans. Yet, when inflation hits everybody, it hits us too. And so costs are continually rising. You want to be able to pay your employees a higher wage, obviously, for them to combat those increases. But your reimbursement seeing patients doesn't necessarily change at all. In fact, if anything, it goes down. And so what you end up having to do to sort of keep up with all of that is find ways to either add services on that can be maybe a little more profitable or be more efficient. And so for the past year and a half or 2 years, we've kind of leaned into the efficiency side pretty strongly. Um, and you'd be surprised how many areas you can find where things aren't going as smooth as they should. But the reason I emphasize efficiency is because that is one area that doesn't impact patient care. Um, a good example I'd actually give is we recently, partnered with a startup EMR, electronic healthcare record company, to implement into our practice.
Mhm.
And part of the reason we did that is that, we're finding that we're spending an average of maybe, 3 to 6 minutes just on the EMR, typing, clicking away. That's wasted time. That's time you're not spending with the patient, right? And so you can either combat that with a scribe, or which we do have that. But the other way is just to have a company that's sort of like-minded and willing to build in features to help cut that time down. And so it may not sound a lot, but if you can save maybe, 2, 3 minutes per encounter, and let's say you're seeing 30 to 40 patients per day, but you're getting like over an hour, almost 2 hours back to yourself, where you can either add more patients on or maybe tackle more of the admin stuff if you're not having trouble carving out time for that. Um, and so we've found that so far has been successful, and we're still sort of leaning into that more, just given kind of where we're at right now as a practice. Um,
Yeah, that's super interesting. And thank you for the specific example on being more efficient through technology, like a new AMR. You also had mentioned adding services on. Do you have an example of how you've done that?
Yeah, so this is like sort of a stat within, I guess, on the cataract side. Not all practices have a strong premium cataracts sort of package or offerings. So that is one space that we have been doing. But if you're not at all, well, there's a significant, I guess, an opportunity there that could be unlocked. So I guess a recent example on that one would be the light adjustable lens is a relatively new lens that when we first jumped on it, not a lot of people in our market in fact, nobody in our market at the time that we did it was offering it. And so we sort of jumped on that and started marketing that as an aspect that sort of differentiates our practice. And it definitely takes some education to, make the market aware of how great this technology can be.
Mhm.
But that definitely helps because now that's a premium service that's kind of unattached to insurance reimbursements. It's similar to LASIK in that sense, where it's more of a cosmetic service you can offer,
Mhm.
um, and that just having that helps. And so
Yep.
for practices that aren't involved in that arm, that'd be an example of one thing you could do.
Yep. Yep. That's great. And you mentioned in your intro, your practice is expanding from 3 to 4 locations. Congrats on the growth, even from, 1 to 2 and 2 to 3 locations. That's amazing. As you've been on that journey of location growth, what signaled to you that now's the right time to open a second, third, fourth location? And how did you prepare for the expansion?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. There's a couple of things. When I first joined the practice, there were already two locations actually. There's like the original location, which was actually not terribly busy, and the second location, which was sort of the central location. But part of it was just sort of looking at the data, I guess. We were noticing that we were booking out in terms of our appointment visits a certain amount of weeks, which, my goal is to never book out more than 2 weeks, truthfully. And then part of it is also just looking at where our patients were currently coming from, where our competition currently was, and where the growth is going to be in the next few years. And there's a lot of ways you can capture a lot of the data I just talked about in the market. One way is just looking at housing, truthfully. But I found a company that helps hospital systems determine their next location, and I just pinged them because they have access to such granular data to look at. Um, so our practice is very heavy into cataract surgery. I basically had them build a tapestry of all the zip codes in a 5 to 10 mile radius around our two offices and asked them, here are the two locations that I hear have a lot of growth. Where do you think is going to be better given where our competition is laid out? And they gave me some great data that kind of showed forecasted out where the bulk of patients that are going to need that particular service are going to be coming from.
Mhm.
And so based off that data, we kind of knew, okay, if we go to this location north of us, we could probably build a location this many miles out and we get a win-win scenario in the sense that a decent chunk of patients were already coming from that area to see us at our main spot, but we're booking out. So we can transfer them to this third location to jumpstart it and
Mhm.
still not lose any volume at our main office since we're booking out there. So it seems like a natural transition. But a lot of it is looking at the market data in terms of knowing where to go next. Um, and then the marker for deciding to do it was when we felt like we were starting to book out a little bit more than we wanted to. And we felt, okay, we're probably ready now to take that next step.
Yep. Awesome. And we do have a question um, from the team. Do you try and mimic services offered at each location to accommodate more patients, or do you have specialized services at certain locations? And how did you think that out?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, for the most part, we do try to have all services accounted for at each location, but the frequency will be different. And so, as an example, we do have a retina specialist on our team. He goes to each location depending on his schedule, but he can't obviously be at all of them every day until I guess we hire more people. And so, what ends up happening is that each location will have every service, but if there's a given day where they need something, they might have to travel to our central location. Now, fortunately, our central location is not very far from the other three at this point. But as an example, to the light adjustable lens I just mentioned, there is a device you actually have to purchase to apply those treatments. So if we generate surgeries and the patient wants that lens, we can do the surgery closer to their home, But for the light treatment, for the time being, they'll have to make that trip to our central office. Now, the plan is to sort of track the data on this. And if an office starts showing enough volume, then it would make sense just to purchase an additional unit at that point.
Mhm.
But that's going to be something that we'll have to track and just see how it goes in the future.
Mhm. Mhm. Um, what's the shifting gears a little bit? What would you say is the most rewarding part of operating a growing practice?
Yeah, I mean, I think the growth in itself is a bit rewarding because there's a lot of metrics you can benchmark your practice against. Right now, private equity seems to be all the rage for a lot of practice and consolidations. But they have a lot of metrics that they create for benchmarks when they jump into a practice, and that's easily available. So I see what those are, and I try just to beat their benchmarks. And if my thought is that if we're hitting on those benchmarks, then we're probably doing something right? Because the way we grow is largely word of mouth and referral based. And in order to capture real growth from that, you have to do a really good job because you you, you can't have people neutrally happy about you. You kind of have them singing your praises a bit. And
Mhm.
so if we're able to grow in that kind of fashion, then that just for I don't know, right or wrong, we take that as a signal. Okay, we're doing a good job. We're making people happy, and we're still able to grow and hit the metrics we're looking for.
Yeah, no, that's awesome that you kind of pave your own way and you're defining success for yourself. There is another question from a attendee. How do you handle staffing and staff retention during practice expansion? Certainly a hot topic. Curious to hear
Yeah.
your perspective, Dr. Patel.
This has been probably the one of the more difficult things we've had to deal with since we've taken over, especially with the pandemic. Oh, because I'm sure you guys all real experience this. That short period was impossible to find people. That is always a challenge. And so for us, one, we're always looking for good people. So if we ever find an applicant, even if we're fully staffed, but we don't think we need that extra body, but we think it's a good person, we hire them.
Mhm.
Because the reality is that I always want to be slightly overstaffed to anticipate for potential staff calling out or just, moving on, leaving us to another job. And so that way we're hopefully operating from a point of being overstaffed slightly to just being regularly staffed.
Got it.
Because just the way our volume is, if we get understaffed, it ends up being a little bit more of a painful day, and something's going to give at that point. Either the staff will get frustrated, which is usually what ends up happening. But then wait times can also kind of expand on that given day, and that ruins the patient experience. And
Mhm.
that's the thing we don't want to sacrifice. So
Mhm.
for
Mhm.
us, it's worth a slight financial hit to be a little overstaffed and just
Yep.
have that buffer in place.
Yep. Thank you for sharing that. And it seems we've sparked a discussion. Thanks, everybody who's contributing questions. Please keep it up. Um, you said patient experience. So, attendee has asked, what role does patient education and communication play in your practice growth?
Oh, big time. That's I think on the patient side, that's probably the biggest challenge is I feel like there is a decent knowledge gap in terms of the general public to what we need to try and convey. And so communication ends up being the biggest thing. So for me, the longest visit, the most difficult thing to explain is actually cataract surgery. And so what I've actually done is I've created videos using the iPhone, wonderful quality, and I pre-recorded the general things I say about cataract surgery, the different lens options, pre-op, post-op, everything really. And I host them on YouTube because it's free. And
Oh,
so the way our EHR is going to work is that when a patient schedules in for a new patient cataract eval, before they even walk through the door, they get a text message that greets them to our practice, but then provides a link for them to click, take them to YouTube, and just hear everything I'm going to say. Now, I still say all of it in the room now, but it serves as a useful primer. So when they walk in, I'd say about half the patients already know what they want from me, actually. And the other half don't know, they're a little confused. But it still helps a lot because then I explain it again to them and then I refer back to the video to say, hey, listen, I said a lot. I know I did. I don't expect you to memorize all this stuff.
yeah.
Go back to the video, listen to it again. And if you think of questions, write them down, call my office, and we can go over it again on the phone.
That
So the videos I think have helped a lot.
Yeah, that's a really smart tactic, and very aligned to how people are consuming information these days, right? So we're all used to the short video snippets. Do you get good feedback on that?
Oh, I get great feedbacks. I will say there is no production. You can hire companies to do this kind of stuff for you and make it look all fancy. Mine is literally, I sat at my desk, turned my phone on and hit record, and then just post it onto YouTube myself. I've actually gotten good feedback on that from the majority of patients. They appreciate it's not commercialized, and I'm not trying to sell them anything. I'm just educating them on what they're going to be hearing when they come to my office. Um, Everyone's different. I've had one person that told me I should like make it look professional and fancy, but I would say he's been the exception. The norm has been they appreciate the fact that it's like a normal video, just of
Right.
me.
No, that's great. And you got to start somewhere, right? Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
so we have somebody who has been thinking about expanding, and they say, how does one know they're ready to expand? I've been thinking about it for a while, but I'm nervous. Any advice for somebody who might be nervous branching out?
Yeah, I mean, I get being nervous. We sort of were too. But one thing I'd always tell you, it's good to have a bias towards action, right? Just if you feel like you've got that fire and you can take on that additional bandwidth, just do it. It's probably going to go better than you think it is. I mean, having the data helps certainly. If you're booking out, helps certainly. There's going to be challenges along the way, but ultimately, you can get stuck in analysis paralysis. And so if you've got a location in mind that you're thinking about going to, yeah, I'd say take those steps, start moving forward on that. There's really no right or wrong to saying you should do it this day or that day. It's just more just have that bias to action.
Yep. Yep. That's helpful. Or I hope that's helpful for the
Yeah,
person
I hope
who
so too.
asked. Great response. Thank you for that. Um, One more question here from the audience, and then I do have one more question for you from us. Is there any particular tech that's helped you expand, specifically low cost? You did mention the EMR, EHR, anything else?
On the tech side,
Mm.
I mean, I can't think of a tech side helping with expansion really. Um, I mean, I guess it would just be the EMR because that's been so helpful with cutting down our wait. But even then, that wouldn't help with expansion necessarily. That
Okay.
just helps with more patient flow throughout the day. That's a good question. I don't have a great answer for tech helping with the expansion
Yeah,
necessarily.
that's okay.
Um,
So I think it's more the tech helping with efficiency, and that's allowed you to streamline your
yeah,
operations so that you
that's
can
definitely true. Yeah.
expand. Awesome. And last question, why do you advocate for eye doctors to work in independently run practices? What personal and professional benefits have you experienced, and why do you believe this model generally benefits ophthalmologists?
Yeah, I could talk about this for a few hours probably, but I have a very strong opinion that, yeah, more people should be going into private practice. Everyone in the equation wins. And so, yes, there is more administrative work for an owner to do. There are some headaches that do come along with staffing, but the net gain is so much more than that that to me, if you experience it, it becomes a no-brainer. You should be doing it. So what I mean by that is that I have control of my schedule. So if something's not flowing correctly, I can immediately change and fix it. And that autonomy is priceless. I effectively get to choose or practice the way I want to practice. No one gets to dictate that over to me. And I think the patient benefits too, in the sense that they're getting care that I am putting my name and reputation on the line for versus a conglomerate or a practice where you got to be honest, the doctor's going to be a little bit less invested in the reputation of the practice because it's not really their practice. But even beyond that, there's a whole financial consideration of what happens when you get these big practice, they negotiate higher prices for the practice, and the doctors end up seeing that. It goes to the administrative bloat. But everyone experiences that pain in the sense that when the insurance companies have to pay these higher premiums, what do? Well, they raise the deductibles and premiums on everybody else, not just the people visiting that particular practice. And there are plenty of studies that you can look up that show that the care does change when like a PE group or a massive group takes over a smaller practice. And so for patients, it's definitely, I think, a loss. For the greater community, it's a loss because of the increased costs. And for the doctors, it would be a loss because any new doctor coming to that situation, their potential is just it's limited and their control is limited. Um, yeah, so if you want, that autonomy, that control to make something that's uniquely you, the only way you're gonna get that is in private practice.
Yeah, and to something you said earlier in the conversation, that bias for action and being able to go from idea to action
Yeah. Oh yeah.
fast or slow as you need or want to, I imagine is quite different in the scenario of the independently owned practice.
Absolutely. Yes. Very true.
Awesome. Well, this has been such an amazing conversation, Dr. Patel, very inspiring. And thank you, attendees, for your very thoughtful questions. They were very much appreciated. And I can't believe we covered so much in only 20 minutes. So thank you for being with us. And thank you for being a Virtual Fields customer. We appreciate you, Dr. Patel.
Absolutely. Thank you guys.